Karen was screaming at the top of her lungs while trying to scoop up what used to be her rose garden with a snow shovel. Her lawn looked like it had been nuked. The oak tree she bragged about in every HOA newsletter was half dead, leaking blackened sap like it had been cursed. And as for her prize-winning Bionas, yeah, they were bubbling. Literally bubbling. Freeze frame. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up poisoning the entire front yard of the HOA president. But if you think I started this war, you've clearly never had your hose stolen every morning for 3 months straight. The first time I noticed something was wrong with the hose, I brushed it off. Thought maybe it was just one of those weird optical illusions, the kind your brain conjures up when you're running on too little sleep and too much caffeine. The end of the hose was damp, curled just a bit differently than how I left it the night before. The coil pattern was off. My grip tightened around my mug, but I shrugged and went back inside. The second time, I was sure. Noticed a light trail in the dirt. Too deliberate, too recent. Like someone had dragged it across the ground and didn't care to cover it up. I checked the spigot. The handle had been rotated barely half a turn, but I knew how I left it. I always shut it tight. I'm a creature of habit. That's when the suspicion started. I didn't want to believe it was Karen. Not yet, but by the end of week 2, I knew it in my bones. The hose would shift overnight. Sometimes it was warm in the morning like it had been used. Sometimes I'd find fresh moisture around the nozzle even though I hadn't watered anything. We were in the middle of stage 3 drought restrictions. Watering hours were strictly limited, and Karen, bless her aggressively manicured heart, had been lecturing the entire block about compliance at every HOA meeting like she was the reincarnation of Mother Nature herself. "We are stewards of this ecosystem," she said last month, "and every drop counts." Funny, coming from someone whose lawn was somehow thriving during the driest summer in a decade. It looked like a golf course had mated with a botanical garden and dumped its offspring in the middle of her front yard. Rows of hydrangeas, high-maintenance Bionas, even a koi pond setup that was frankly illegal under the new HOA Water Conservation Addendum. But hey, Karen was the HOA president. She wrote the addendum. Of course, she wasn't going to enforce it on herself. By week 3, I'd had enough of hunches and hosing. I set up a trail cam. Actually 2. One trained on the spigot, one hidden in a birdhouse aimed at the path between my yard and hers. I set the motion sensitivity to max and let it run. First night, nothing. Second night, nothing. Third night, bingo. At 2:47 a.m., there she was. Karen Mitchell, 49 years old, president of the Willow Hills HOA, leader of the Eco Neighbors of Eastview, and apparently a certified water thief. She crept across my lawn like a raccoon in Lululemon, wore all black, carried a collapsible bucket. She didn't just turn the spigot on. She attached a splitter the kind landscapers use and ran a concealed rubber hose through the hedge line into her own yard. She had done this before. She was fast, efficient, out in 7 minutes flat. But the camera caught it all, night vision and everything. I watched the clip 5 times. Then I poured myself a drink. The next morning, I tried to be civil. I walked over. Karen was out front pruning her boxwoods like she hadn't just violated 3 property lines in a city ordinance. I didn't even accuse her outright. Just mentioned the water use, the odd hose movement. "Oh, honey," she said, fake laugh and all. "Maybe a raccoon messed with it. They're very intelligent." I told her I had security footage. Her smile faltered for half a second. Then she leaned in close, still smiling, and whispered, "You know, unsecured hoses are a violation under Section 14.3. Could be a finable offense if someone reported it." Then she patted my arm. "Be safe." That night, I got the violation notice, bright yellow, pinned to my door like a scarlet letter. $150 for equipment left unattended and in public view. Funny, my hose had been hanging in the same spot for the past 5 years. No issue until now. I emailed the HOA board. No reply. I left a voicemail. Nothing. I submitted an official complaint. A week later, the dues went up. Not just mine, everyone's. Karen sent out a memo stating, "Due to increased community water usage and evidence of shared zone violations, dues must be adjusted accordingly." Shared zone? I didn't even have a shared zone. I lived on a single lot property with a closed perimeter. That's when it clicked. She wasn't just stealing my water. She was rewriting the rules to blame me for it, turning her theft into my liability, turning me into the problem, and nobody cared. Everyone thought Karen was a hero. She passed out succulents on Earth Day. She held composting classes for kids. She'd made a whole post on the neighborhood app about switching her SUV to a hybrid. And me, I was just the cranky guy with the hose. So, I stopped talking, stopped emailing. I went quiet, but I watched. Every morning at 3 a.m., like clockwork, Karen would make her pilgrimage. Sometimes in sneakers, sometimes in slippers, always with the same little setup. Attach the hose, turn on the spigot, run the concealed line, and vanish into the dark. I started tracing where the hose went. One night, I followed it. I waited until 3:15, slipped through the hedge line with a flashlight wrapped in red cellophane, and crept along her garden path. What I found stopped me cold. The hose didn't just feed a few flower beds. It disappeared underground, literally tunneled through a PVC conduit that snaked beneath a decorative rock wall. I followed it, popped open a false planter lid, and found a hidden irrigation manifold professionally installed. It had valves, timers, a backflow preheater, and one glaring red flag, a label reading, Main Supply Willow, a north tap. That wasn't her spigot. That was mine. She had built an entire underground watering system off my outdoor faucet. My water, my bill, my name, and she'd been running it for weeks, maybe longer. I felt the fury rise like bile, but I didn't cut the hose. Not yet. I took photos, video, pulled my latest water bill, compared it to last summer. The usage had tripled. I submitted a full report to the HOA, even printed a glossy folder and dropped it off at the community center. 3 days later, I got a response. Thank you for your concern. The board has reviewed your claims and determined there is insufficient evidence to pursue action. As always, we appreciate neighborly discretion during times of conflict. Insufficient evidence. They had footage, timestamps, plumbing diagrams. They had receipts. Still nothing. That's when I knew I had to escalate. This wasn't just about water anymore. Karen wasn't stealing out of need. She was stealing out of principle because she could. Because she was the HOA president. Because nobody was going to stop her. I stopped calling it the hose. I started calling it the vein because it was the lifeline between our houses. It fed her kingdom, and I was done watching it happen. So I started planning. I didn't touch the setup. Didn't move a thing. I let her keep stealing. Let her feel safe while I prepared for the long game. Because I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to make her yard remember me forever. It took exactly 6 weeks of silence to build the case. Every day, I played the fool. I let Karen keep tapping into my water line. Let her garden bloom like Eden. Let her flaunt her emerald front lawn while the rest of the neighborhood browned and died like fall came early. She thought I'd given up, that I'd been embarrassed into silence. She even waved to me one morning, the smirk under her sunglasses just a little too smug to be friendly. Nice weather for some responsible watering, she chirped. I waved back, said nothing. That same day, I upgraded the trail cams to 1080 IP and switched the night vision setting to full infrared. Every angle, every connection, every drop, now 2/24. I filmed the hidden manifold beneath her planter lid and the spiderweb of black dripline tubing that spread beneath her mulch like a vascular system. One she'd stolen straight from my tap. It fed everything. The front lawn, the side hedgerows, the rose beds, even the back patio pots that were supposed to be hand-watered under HOA rules. Every zone activated at 3:04 a.m. on a timer, ran for 28 minutes, then reset. I traced every tube and dug up exact GPS coordinates, overlaid the piping on a top-down blueprint of our 2 properties. You'd think I was mapping a crime scene, and I was because it was a crime. She just didn't know how far I was willing to go to make it public. The real break came when I pulled city records, plumbing permits, landscape exemptions. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, registered to her address in the past 5 years. And yet, she'd somehow installed a buried manifold, a smart timer system, a dual tap hookup, and an above-ground valve assembly with backflow prevention. All required by law to be inspected and permitted, which meant she had bypassed city code, state plumbing guidelines, and drought compliance regulations. Meanwhile, she was publicly blaming neighborhood brownouts on non-compliant residents refusing to adhere to Phase 3 watering restrictions. Her words copy and pasted from an HOA-wide newsletter she sent just 2 weeks earlier. As president, it breaks my heart to see our neighborhood fall into neglect due to selfish misuse of our community water supply. She wrote, The board will be increasing inspections and imposing fines on households whose lawns are contributing to runoff, erosion, and sprinkler overuse. I nearly choked when I read it. She was stealing my water, blaming me for usage spikes, and then ticketing other residents for the lawn death she was causing by hoarding the supply. I knew 3 neighbors on our block who had voluntarily let their grass die to avoid fines. One even replaced their lawn with drought-tolerant rockscaping after Karen called it unsightly at an open meeting. But she was hosting garden parties like it was Buckingham Dam Palace, and it was working. Everyone adored her. Karen's lawn looks amazing. She must be doing something right. One of the HOA members said during a walkthrough. Yeah, she was doing something all right. So, I submitted the complaint anonymously, went online, filled out the city's water violation form, uploaded footage from my cameras, timestamped and dated. I included close-up shots of the unauthorized valve, diagrams of the pipe's direction, and a breakdown of my own water bills from the past year, showing a 240% spike since her system had gone active. I added a polite note that I'd prefer to remain anonymous, but that I'd be happy to assist any investigation if needed. I didn't expect action overnight. City enforcement moves like syrup. But 4 days later, I got the call. Block number male voice. This Mr. Thompson, I didn't answer. Just letting you know your water complaint was received. We've opened a case. If your information checks out, we'll escalate to site inspection. He paused. You didn't hear this from me, but if you have a chance to not be home Thursday morning, say around 9 o'clock, might be a good time to take a long walk. Click. So, Thursday morning, I went for a walk. 2 hours, maybe 3. Just long enough for the city van to pull up and knock on Karen's door while I was definitely not home with a camera pressed to the upstairs window. I didn't see what happened inside, but I saw enough. The inspectors spent 20 minutes poking around her hedges. One of them stood with a clipboard while the other knelt by the planter box, peeled back the mulch, and found the buried manifold. He radioed something to the van. I saw Karen come outside in heels, bathrobe, and fury, pointing and gesturing and waving papers. But her face changed when the second inspector held up a printed diagram, the same one I'd submitted with the complaint. Her mouth moved, but her hands froze. She stopped arguing. They spent another 30 minutes on site, took soil samples, then left. That night, the neighborhood app lit up like a bonfire. Anyone know why there were city trucks outside Karen's place? Inspection, maybe? She's the president. Isn't she the one calling them? Karen didn't respond, but the next morning, I found a fresh violation notice on my mailbox. Excessive runoff from northeast perimeter. Suspected result of hose tampering. HOA citation 221B. Fine. 325. My blood boiled. I called the HOA line. Got Margaret, the ever-useless secretary who only ever sounded alert when you said late dues. I asked for clarification. She said there had been a complaint about mud runoff crossing into the sidewalk. Funny, I said. I don't water that side of the house anymore. Haven't in 2 months. Well, then the cause is unknown, she said. But the violation stands. Karen had retaliated again for getting caught. She couldn't disprove the complaint, so she tried to get me on a technicality. The hose wasn't even connected, but that didn't matter. She just needed the appearance of guilt. That's when I broke. Not emotionally, strategically. I stopped reacting and started preparing my real response. She wanted to weaponize runoff. Fine. I'd weaponize her entire lawn. I pulled soil samples from her backyard. At 4 a.m. under a new moon, I crossed the property line and used a plastic spoon to take 12 g of topsoil from the base of her flower beds, bagged them, labeled them, took them to Mr. Plastic spoon to take 12 g of topsoil. Henry. Now let me tell you about Mr. Henry, retired USDA botanist, lived 4 doors down, grew orchids in a humidity-controlled shed that looked like a meth lab crossed with Jurassic Park. Everyone thought he was a little eccentric. He wore galoshes year-round and carried a clipboard to pick up his mail. But I knew better. The man was a genius. He used to consult on turf restoration projects for the city back in the day. I brought him the soil. He took one sniff and raised an eyebrow. That's not local. I asked him what he meant. He said the pH balance was off. Too alkaline. He ran it through some tests and came back shaking his head. You got polymerized root enhancers in here. He said unregistered ones not sold through any licensed vendor in this state. I asked what that meant. He said means she's juicing the grass and illegally. These types of enhancers push root systems deep fast, but they make plants hyperdependent. You mess with their watering schedule, even a little, and they collapse. Collapse? That word stuck with me. So, I asked him a simple question. Could we collapse it? He smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from him in years. We'd need to know her watering schedule. I showed him my notes. He looked impressed. This might actually work, he said. We spent the next 3 days brewing what Henry called a stress cocktail. Non-toxic, no chemicals that would trigger a legal hazard. Just a blend of soil-tolerant inhibitors and root disruptors, the kind you'd use to clear invasive species without damaging the surrounding landscape. We stored it in gallon jugs labeled turmeric compost tea in case Karen snooped. Then we rigged it. I took one of her connector valves, the same one she'd used to steal my water, and swapped it with a near-identical one I bought online. But this one had a hidden injector. Every time the valve opened and water flowed through it, it would mix a controlled dose of our stress cocktail into the stream. I even made sure the pressure drop would be imperceptible. She'd never know. The injection ran for 4 nights. I watched from the porch. First night, nothing. Second night, hydrangeas started to curl. Third night, the front edge of the sod began turning a dull, sickly yellow. Fourth night, the bionas folded in on themselves like wilted paper, Karen noticed. I could tell by the way she stormed out of her garage with her little green spray bottle, attacking the browning patches like it was personal. But she didn't know the cause. Not yet. That was only phase 1. The stress test, the calm before the collapse. She had built a garden on stolen water and borrowed science. And now it was time for both to turn on her and me. I just kept sipping coffee, watching her from my porch like the world's most polite executioner. Because the next phase wasn't just about revenge. It was about poetic justice. And if you think a few dead bionas were the end, you don't know what happens when roots die all at once. I'd never felt more alive than the moment I watched a 30-row of hydrangeas gasp for air. I know that sounds psychotic, and maybe it was, but when someone turned your waterline into a private reservoir for their suburban Versailles cosplay, you earned the right to reclaim a little power. And this time, I wasn't taking it back with emails or city complaints or passive-aggressive yard signs. No, this was surgical, legal adjacent, and utterly invisible. The backflow valve system was a work of art. I'd modified a standard anti-siphon Y connector with a one-way check valve and pressure-triggered release injector. It was the kind of setup used in agricultural testing where you feed nutrients or herbicides through irrigation lines in microdoses. Not dangerous on its own. Entirely legal to own, but once you pump in something like Henry's root, no. 5. An experimental blend of nitrogen inhibitors, calcium blockers, and water stress accelerants. Then you're dancing in the legal gray zone. You didn't apply anything to their property. You didn't touch a single blade of grass. You just let the hose do what it was already doing, watering, sort of. It started small. The first dose went out during the 3:04 a.m. irrigation cycle, triggered by Karen's own timer. The valve opened, water flowed, and the injection port did its thing. 10 milliliters. That's it. Just enough to get absorbed into the topsoil beneath her beloved flower beds. Night 2, we did it again and again and again. On night 5, I noticed it. A subtle patch of pale discoloration on the north end of her lawn. Nothing major, just a small circle of turf that looked a bit less green than the rest. To the average eye, it was sun exposure or a misaligned sprinkler head. But I knew better. The sodium uptake had begun. By week 2, the discoloration had spread. The bionas browned at the edges, curling like parchment in a low flame. The mulch around the rose beds grew patchy and thin, as if even the worms had moved out. Karen, true to form, went into full denial mode. She stood in her yard for hours, hose in hand, misting each withered bloom like a field nurse with a dying patient. She ordered new topsoil, sprayed kelp emulsion, even had a bag of volcanic ash shipped from Oregon. I watched from my porch sipping lemonade. Henry watched too from behind his hedge. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Every yellowing leaf was a love letter to justice. The HOA noticed by week 3. Karen called an emergency board meeting, framed it as an environmental crisis affecting our neighborhood's horticultural integrity. She used words like sabotage, ecosystem degradation, and my personal favorite, bioassault. I wasn't invited to the meeting, of course, but I heard every word. Margaret, the HOA secretary, leaked the transcript to me in exchange for a bottle of chilled Chardonnay and a promise to fix her front porch light. "We are dealing with an unprecedented threat," Karen had declared. "My yard has been compromised, and if they can do it to me, they can do it to any of you." I guess they meant me, though she didn't have the guts to say it. Not yet. After the meeting, she escalated. She hired a private investigator. Some guy named Rick who used to be a bounty hunter in Nevada and now wore Oakley's full-time and parked his van across the street like he was staking out a meth lab instead of a guy with a lemon tree and a grudge. Rick approached me once, asked if I'd seen anything strange at night. I told him yes, actually I had. I'd seen a middle-aged woman sneaking onto my property and hooking up a hose to my spigot. I even offered to show him the footage. He mumbled something about needing to check with the client and vanished. I saw him a few days later talking to the mailman, then the trash guy, then the neighbor's twins. Karen was spiraling. She sent out an HOA-wide bulletin warning residents to report any suspicious children and remain vigilant for signs of acid vandalism. The Thompson kids got grounded for riding scooters too close to her property line. She accused the Rodriguez family of planting invasive clover near her driveway. She filed 3 noise complaints in 1 week against a toddler's birthday party. Meanwhile, the grass died faster. By week 4, the damage was undeniable. A necrotic wave had rippled through the lawn like a plague in slow motion. The once perfect green was now a mosaic of brown rot, blackened splotches, and weeping root beds. The rose bushes collapsed in on themselves, petals falling like ash. The koi pond, which I hadn't touched, developed a film so thick the fish were gulping at the surface like they were breathing through a plastic bag. She had city inspectors out twice. They found no cause. She paid a private soil analyst. He blamed environmental fatigue. She refused to believe it. Couldn't comprehend how her miracle garden was failing. Sometimes, you don't need to shout to get justice. You just need patience, observation, and the right moment. The story above isn't just a tale of perfect revenge. It's a powerful lesson in staying calm, thinking strategically, and standing up to misused authority. In life, there will always be Karens, people who believe that titles, positions, or temporary popularity give them the right to act without consequence. But the truth is, every game has its rules, and the person who understands the rules best can flip the entire board. When someone takes advantage of your silence to overstep boundaries, let that silence become the foundation of a solid plan. They may think they're winning, but they don't realize you're quietly gathering every piece of evidence, every slip-up, every small detail. And then one day, without raising your voice, all you have to do is turn on the tap, and their whole kingdom crumbles from the roots. Remember, true power doesn't come from striking back immediately. It comes from knowing exactly when to press the button. Justice doesn't rush, but when it arrives the right way, and nothing can stop it.